Hey everybody. So this is the conclusion of day 9. Um, Technically, I guess it's Nebraska conclusion, but as it is, I'm currently in Laramie, Wyoming. I managed to get this far, so um, wind blown hair for most of the day. I kind of was unwinding a little bit and decided I better do this video before I pass out, seeing as how it's like almost 11 p.m. here. So, some final thoughts about Nebraska. It's always good to go to Nebraska. For me, it's um, it's a connection to my grandparents. Grand Island was the home. It was the hometown of my grandfather. Um, Side note, and I didn't know this until I was actually on a part of highway that was named after him. Henry Fonda was from Grand Island. He was born in Grand Island, so there's kind of like you know a famous connection there. I didn't realize that the state fair is held there in that city, but um, I would have thought that it would have been in one of the bigger cities like Omaha or Lincoln. But um, come to think of it, I mean Grand Island is pretty centrally located when you look at a map and you look at um, the state. It's pretty well centrally located on I-80. So um, today was the first time I'd ever gone to Fullerton, and that was my grandmother's hometown. And it was pretty. I keep saying surreal, but I don't know that that's the right word to use. Um, I definitely felt whenever I'm in Grand Island, I feel a connection to my grandfather. He's been gone since 2015. And I guess in a way, I kind of felt a connection to my grandmother, although I really didn't explore the town so much because I went to the cemetery that's at the edge of town. And then I barely popped into town just to get gas, get some food, and, get on the road again. But, I was at the cemetery for, I mean, it was a while. I didn't really pay attention to how long I'd been there. Probably a couple hours, maybe. I'll show you here. All that dirt, right? These shoes are brown, right? You can see that, you know, that's all dirt. And near as I can tell, I picked that up in the cemetery because they have some. I mean, it's loose gravel, but it's kind of dirt gravel. It's hard to explain. And then some of the dirt, the hard ground was. Um, I'm just walking through it, and I think that's where I picked it up from. I don't recall where else I could have picked it up from, but I was about ready to give up hope that I couldn't find it. I did cue it up a picture of the grave, the headstone there. And when I finally got a good look at what the headstone looked like, that on top it was reddish, on the bottom it was kind of grayish, um, that it was surrounded by some other headstones and trees. So then I started looking for those specific landmarks that looked similar. And then after a while, I finally found it. But it was like toward the end of my search, and it's like, man, I've pretty much been everywhere in this, in the cemetery. And what they say, it's like you always find what you're looking for in the last place you look. So I got to find my great great grandfather, and um, it was a very somber, solemn moment for me. I put my hand, I took a knee. I took a knee and I put my hand on the headstone. And I just took a moment of silence to, to offer up for him. And then just sat there in awe, and looking at his birth date, which escapes me now. Birth year was 1879, and he died in 1914. So, I'm counting around, I'm doing the math. He's only 35 years old. That's still too young. I mean, men were still living into their 60s, albeit, they were considered old in their, 60s back then. But I mean, man, I don't know what, I honestly, I don't know what the nature of his death was. So I don't know about that, but he was, he was long gone before my grandfather was, ever around. So my grandfather was born in 1927. So he never knew his grandfather at all. He spoke very highly of his grandmother. Like I'd mentioned in previous videos, he had spoken very highly of his grandmother. But all he really ever mentioned was how he used to spend summers with her. He made mention that when he got older, like 13-ish, like, I want to say his mother couldn't really control him, so she just sent him off to her mother. And so that's why he would go bounce back and forth between Nebraska and Oregon, because the grandmother came out. My great-great-grandmother came out to Oregon. So, I mean, that's really why I am here. That's really why my family came out here. On my mother's side, it's because Grandpa had a love and affinity for Oregon because of all the times he'd spent out there with his grandmother, and that's why he moved my grandmother and my uncle out to Oregon, where my other uncle was born, my mom was born, my aunt was born. And on my father's side, it was almost kind of the same situation. My grandfather had a friend that lived out in Oregon. He was invited to come out, and he went out and visited his friend, and he fell in love with it. And so he moved my grandmother, who was pregnant with my father, out there. And so Dad was born in Oregon. So, both my parents are first generation born Oregonians, and I'm second generation. So, it was very surreal to see that my Kennedy grandfather was also a veteran. I didn't catch this at first, and I don't think it's in that video that I filmed of his grave marker there. But if I don't know if you catch it in the video, but I do have some stills that I took where there's these little decorative, for lack of a better word, a pin, but it's like a decorative device that's pinned right next to his grave. And I really didn't take too much notice of them until I actually looked at them, and I took close-up pictures of them. And he was a veteran of the Spanish-American War of 1898. And if I'm reading that right, he was involved in the campaigns in the Philippines, in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and I think there was something else, but I can't remember what it was. And I think that the pin to, so that was on that decorative device to the left when you're staring at his grave marker, his headstone. To the left, you see what campaign, that he's a veteran of that war. And on the right hand side, there was this light gray decorative device, which it kind of looks like that might have been the military unit that he was with. So I know now I'm kind of intrigued to see what else I can dig up and learn about this man, because it's amazing. So I I got to pay my respects to President Truman yesterday, and then I got to pay my respects to my great great grandfather, who I dubbed my Kennedy grandfather, because he's the disavowed brother of James Patrick Kennedy Sr. That would be President Kennedy's father. So my great great grandfather was the disowned, disavowed, kicked out of the family uncle of President Kennedy. So, and I got back out on the road, and by that point it was like, I don't know, almost 2 in the afternoon. I drove down the road, stopped in North Platte, and I don't know what made me think that North Platte was further west than it is. I mean, I'm looking at this big map in Denny's where I basically I ate so much that like I'm not even hungry now. So essentially I had dinner, I'd wrapped up dinner by 6 p.m. I was eating dinner at like 5:30. But it was such a big meal that, I'll be ravenous tomorrow, I'm sure. But I'm looking at this big map on the wall, and I look at where Grand Island is. I look at where Cheyenne is, and I see where we are there in North Platte, and I'm like, oh, man, it looks like I didn't go very far, and I'd been on the road a couple hours. So I made it to Cheyenne, and I got to thinking, on one hand, I don't want to risk hazardous road conditions, right? Because I'm getting up into the Rockies now. Well, I am in the Rockies, and inclement weather being what it is, and I don't have traction devices. You don't want to be caught in black ice. But then I went further than Cheyenne because I rationalized in my head that, hey, if the truckers are going, so can I. And if I'm seeing truckers coming from the opposite direction, that should be a telltale sign that the roads are probably pretty decent. And they were. There's another video there where I stopped at a rest stop, and I said that I thought that it was exit 383. It wasn't exit 383. It's exit 323. And that's a Lincoln Monument, because I guess that stretch of Highway 80, or Interstate 80, it's the Lincoln Highway. So there's this big, huge monument, this big, huge head bust of President Lincoln. I remember seeing it like out of the rear view mirror, the side view mirror, when I was coming, when I was leaving Oregon, going to Kentucky. And I had just left Rollins, and I'd been on the road for a while, and I'd come right through Laramie, and I'm just, cruising along, and I see something off to the side of the road, and then I didn't really, it looked like a big bus, but I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't until I kind of looked in my side view mirror, and it was like, holy crap, that's Lincoln. Well, I wonder what this is. And I said, note to self that if I ever come back this way, whenever I come back this way, I'm going to stop and I'm going to go see that. Well, I thought it was on the Wyoming-Nebraska border. So, I kept looking and looking and looking while there was daylight, nothing. And I was like, well, okay, so it's got to be on the Idaho-Wyoming border. So I didn't think anything of it until I happened to see a sign, Lincoln Monument. And then I was like, I almost had a fluffy moment. Anyone who knows Gabriel Iglesias, the comedian, he does the car sounds where, it comes to a screeching halt. I just butchered that. But, I pulled off the side of the road, and even though it was dark, it was like, 9 o'clock by this point. It was dark. There's plenty of ambient light there to kind of light up the monument, that I was still able to get good photos with my phone because I had the flash on, and I was able to take decent video to where, I mean, you can actually see me. So so there is a, I'm sure you've probably already seen it if you're watching these videos in progressive order. Um, this being the conclusion for the day of day 9 in Nebraska. I'll have probably would have been the video before this. So I mean, hopefully you've already seen it, but I thought it was pretty cool. So it's definitely one of the highlights of my my day 9 journey, I should say. Obviously, the nothing really compares to seeing my great grandfather's grave. It's I'm still kind of blown away at at first I was like, well, I'm probably not gonna find it. you know I was being, call it crazy or silly or whatever. Darren, you'll understand this. I was calling out to him. At one point, I called out, James Chris Kennedy, where are you? I am your, I want to come find you. I want to come see you. I called out to, the others who were resting in sleep, resting in peace there. And I'm like, if any of you could point me in the right direction to James Kennedy, I would really appreciate it. I am his great grandson. I would just like to pay my respects to my grandfather. So back home, I'm part of DBK Investigations. I used to say I am the B. It's a paranormal group where they cryptids, ghost hunting, Sasquatch hunting, you name it. See, I'm the resident skeptic because I don't put a whole lot of stock or faith in that, but I don't believe in ghosts. Never have. Mind you, I have experienced some things that I cannot explain, and I just simply say, I cannot explain this. I don't know what it is, but I'm not like that. Oh, geez, what's that guy on Ancient Aliens who, he's thoroughly convinced that a lack of explanation, lack of logical scientific explanation is inherently a fact that it's aliens from outer space, little green men from Mars. And I'm just like, that's not how science works. When you're testing a theory, a lack of evidence is not evidence, if that makes any sense. You can't just say, because I can't explain this, that's automatic evidence that, my hypothesis is correct. No, it just means that you just can't explain what just happened. And I've had experiences just like that where I could not explain what it was that we as a group had experienced, but that's not the definitive smoking gun that is what everyone thinks it is. It just, that's just how my mind works. I believe that's just how a true analytical scientific mind would work. So, I mean, I just leave it at that. But at any rate, because I looked up the photo and I kept looking around and around. The last place I looked was right where I found it. And the thing is, like, earlier I got my hopes up. I mean, I've been walking through, this other section, and I spotted the name Kennedy, and I ran over to it, and I was getting all excited. I'm like, oh yes, I found him. Now, I don't know who Conover Kennedy is. That would be interesting to see if who this Conover Kennedy is. But I found Conover Kennedy, and I was like, oh, nuts. not my Kennedy, not the one I'm looking for. That's I don't know that we're related. And if we are, I don't know how. I do know that there are two back home in Oregon. When I used to work at Weimar, I was a cashier back in the mid 90s. I had a Kennedy that come through, and he said that they were not related. That there were two Kennedy families, that they weren't related, and that he said that his family had been here 100 years before the other Kennedy family, i.e., the president's family, had come to America. Because I believe, I don't think Joseph immigrated. I believe Joseph Sr., that is, and consequently my great-great-grandfather. I don't think they immigrated. I think they were firstborn generation Americans, where I think their parents had immigrated from Ireland. So, but I'm not really sure about. But all in all, I had a great day. I had an amazing experience with seeing Grandpa James, and I had just a good time on the road, and just enjoying just being in Nebraska. I mean, I don't know. It's like I almost feel like Nebraska is like my home away from home. Like, that's probably where I should have settled up when I left Oregon. And that would have been okay with me, because I would have felt some connection there because of my grandparents. Well, it gets stifling hot there in the summer too, but it's not, they don't have that, I don't think they have that sticky humidity like Kentucky has. But I mean, it's, it gets hot in the Midwest for sure. You know, I'm a Pacific Northwesterner guy. That's just how it is. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I think that's, I was born there. I'm probably gonna die there. So it's like, I was a Willamette Valley kid. And yes, for those of you who see this video and aren't from the area, it's pronounced Willamette, not Willamette. It's Willamette. Okay, just like it's Oregon, not Oregon. It's Oregon, Willamette. So, at any rate, it's been a good day, and I'm in. Like I said, this day is coming to a conclusion in Laramie, Wyoming. Tomorrow, I'm wanting to get out of here earlier than what I normally do, and I'm hoping to make the Boise area so that the following day, I make it home. But I don't know, we'll see. Boise's 10 hours from here. On one hand, I kind of wish that I could have made it to Rollins, because then that would have knocked it down to about 7.5, 8 hours from Rollins to Boise. But it is what it is. Essentially, I'm 16 hours from home. And while day one was a 16-hour drive, I don't want to do that again. No, not happening. Could you end the trip on a 16, it's like we started a 16-hour day and we ended a 16-hour day and that was the trip? Sure, but no, I'm not going to do that. So that would just drive me bonkers. So that's the tentative plan, and so that's it. That's the plan, and I'm going to sign off now, and I'm going to wish you all well. I hope you all enjoyed your Easter Sunday 2023. I spent mine traveling, and I spent mine reflecting on the important things that the importance of Easter and its true symbolism, and not Easter bunnies and Easter egg hunts and stuff like that. I spent the day reflecting on Jesus Christ and his resurrection, and that he is risen. He conquered death, and he just it did what he had to do. He fulfilled the prophecy. He fulfilled the prophecy of the Messiah coming. He came here. He preached. He was wrongfully accused. He was beaten. He was scourged, and then he was ultimately crucified for the truth of who he was. And and any pinhead back in the time, they have really good genealogy records back then. They would have known that he was of the direct line of King David. So when he said that he was the king of the Jews, he wasn't lying. He was of the royal line of David. So even had he not been, the Son of God and the ordained King of the Jews by that right, he legitimately, genetically he was a king in his own right, because of I can't speak, the lineage, and lineage was important to these people. Your lineage meant everything, right? And not only did his lineage line up to King David through his father, his lineage also lined up to King David through his mother. They were like so distant cousins, it's not even funny. The gene pool was so watered down that they would have registered as cousins, but they both were of the line of David, and that was done by design. That was, God knows what he's doing. That was done by purpose, so that nobody could dispute who he was. Nobody could dispute his claim. They did, because they were the religious leaders, and they were kind of threatened by the power that they perceived that he would wield. And the only power he ever really wielded, other than the miracles that he did, was that he wielded the truth. So, not to get all preachy, but that's what I reflected on today, this being Easter. I reflected on who he was and is, because he's resurrected, right? He's risen. He spent the next 40 days with his disciples, teaching them how to be apostles, because they got elevated, rank wise. And then he ascended into heaven 40 days later. So that's the little Bible lesson there. So that's what Easter means to me. Easter isn't about the Easter egg hunts and the bunny rabbit and all that. And that's what I celebrated when I was a kid, sure. But when we know the truth about where the origins of these traditions, especially when they're religious holidays, where their origins come from, we also recognize that there's kind of a bastardization going on there. It's just like Christmas. They try to say that this is about, Christ's birth. Well, Jesus wasn't born in December. He wasn't born in the wintertime. I mean, and biblical verses do back that up. When the shepherds were notified of his coming, it said that their flocks were out in the fields. Well, a shepherd is not going to have his flock out in the field in the winter. They pen them up for the winter. They're out free grazing, in the spring and summer, and they'll bring them back in late fall. The latest he possibly could have ever been born would have been possibly around what we would think of as Halloween, possibly, or as early as late August, September sometime. And I go by this because it's also said that he was 33 and a half years old upon his crucifixion, his execution. So if he's 33 and a half and he's executed around this time of year, we'll go back 6 months. And that was probably around the time of his birth. So I don't really put too much stock and faith in these religious holidays anymore. Not like I used to. I mean, well, I've hated Christmas for a long time because the commercialization, and it just bogs me down because I miss my stepdad. But so for my Easter, it was about reflecting on the Lord and what he did, what he accomplished, what he overcame. He overcame death. He rose again. In a way, that's his promise to us, that we also will rise again after our death. And that I believe that to be true, that we will rise again, to be judged, and then from there we go from there. So, and I'm not going to go too much into that, but I mean that's just what I believe. And anyone who wants to have a conversation, we can. I'll absolutely discuss my faith with anybody, and I will absolutely not judge, because that's not my job, right? My job is to bring you the information. What you do with it, well, that's your business, not mine. My sole job was to make the introduction, as it were. So yeah, kind of went off on a little rabbit trail again there. Sorry, it's late and I'm trying to collect all my thoughts. I'm trying to make sure that I've mentioned everything I wanted to talk about, in a conclusion video. And that's why these conclusion videos tend to be longer, is because I don't script these videos. I don't rehearse these videos. I don't, I don't have notes with talking points. I just speak about my day, and wherever it goes. So if you haven't figured out, that's kind of what you're getting here. Is what you see is what you get. The raw, unfiltered, unfettered, uncut Bill. So this is how you get a glimpse of who I really am. And likewise, when I go back and I rewatch some of these videos, I get a sense of where I was and who I was then, because obviously I'll see them in the future, and it'll be past tense at that point, right? So that's how it is, So I had a great day. I'm still flying high on this epic adventure. I've had such a good time. It's been so good for me, mentally and emotionally, spiritually. And I know that it's coming to an end soon, like within the next 2 3 days, and that's kind of bumming me out. I won't lie, because part of the adventure was you know the adventure was the best thing about the adventure, the trip, the journey was that it was what hasn't come yet, which is the final destination, right? I'm trying to put it off as long as possible. And this has been such a great journey, and it's been a longer journey. Because, I mean, like, I just looked at my thing and I think I had 33 videos. And, well, that's not counting the videos for today that I'm about to upload when I'm done here. Is I'm going to video dump all the videos for today. So, what, we had something like 16 videos for the last trip, but then again, that last trip was directly Oregon to Kentucky, and here we went from Kentucky to New Jersey to Pennsylvania to Ohio, all the way through to Illinois, um, to Missouri, to Nebraska, and now through Wyoming, Idaho, Oregon, right? So it's been an amazing journey, and I've enjoyed, putting these videos together for anybody who's watching, for all of those of you who are watching. So, uh, thank you for putting up with my antics. Thank you for, putting up with my long-winded monologues. That was one of the things my ex-wife always hated about me, is that I can get long-winded, but you know that's the plight of an avid historian, right? They look up all the facts and then they could give a very long, lengthy lecture on it, So, and in this case, I'm lecturing about life, my life on the road, my epic journey going home, and I'm sharing that little part of me with all of you. So, thank you for being here, and thank you for watching. And do take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And happy trails, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.